Okay, so welcome to Digitizing Your Family History. This is our November genealogy program for the Ela Area Public Library. I'm so excited that you're all joining us today to learn about how to digitize and preserve your family records. My name is Rebecca Hotman. I am the genealogy and local history librarian at Ela Area Public Library. And I'm joined by my colleague, Dave Fugel, who is the technology coordinator and reference librarian at the library as well.
Hello.
And we're going to spend the next hour or so talking about digitization and what resources you can use at our library and beyond. So if you have any questions or comments during the program, please enter them into the chat or Q&A. And we'll have several points where we'll stop for questions, but also if we can answer them throughout, we will. So today, like I said, we're going to learn how to digitize your family history. And we've split this section into a couple of parts, or a presentation into a couple of parts. So first, I'll go over how to digitize and preserve your family's archives. Then Dave will introduce you to the equipment you can use at the library or at home to digitize your family papers. So first, let's talk about how to digitize and preserve your family's mementos. So all those stacks of photos, those boxes of slides, drawers full of VHS tapes, these are important pieces of your family's history. Taking steps now to care for them ensures that future generations can learn about your family's past. We're going to break this process down into 6 main steps: assembling your family papers, selecting what you want to digitize, the actual digitization process, including some preservation tips, describing and organizing your new digital files, storing and caring for your digitized papers, and sharing your family history with others. So let's talk about each of these steps in a little more detail. The first major step you need to take is to collect your family papers and mementos. But before you start piling photo albums on your dining room table, ask yourself, what is your focus for this project? Are you interested in those items related to your immediate family? Or do you want to expand out to your wider family tree? Maybe you want to prioritize photographs or the items related to your family's experience in World War II. Whatever that focus is, keeping it in mind will help you stay on track throughout your project. Collect the materials you already have in your home in one place, and if relevant, ask relatives if they have items they would be willing to share. Make sure you keep these materials in a safe place that you're willing to dedicate to this project. You don't want to have to move your stacks of paper every time you need to use the kitchen table, or leave fragile family textiles out where a curious child or pet might get to them. If you don't have a spot like this in your home, consider purchasing some banker's boxes or plastic storage tubs to keep your family history materials safe and organized. Once you collect everything together, do an initial sort to see exactly what you have. You may want to keep like items together, for example, letters, photographs, 8mm film reels. This can come in handy when you're using different types of equipment to digitize or convert each different type of material. On the other hand, it may make more sense to you to sort materials by family group, event, or date. This can help when you're describing and organizing your newly digitized files. So choose whichever method makes the most sense to you and stick with it. If you have borrowed materials from relatives, make sure to keep track of them so they don't get mixed up in your papers. At this point, you may also want to sort out any duplicates, whether you have multiple copies of the same photograph or several photocopies of a family tree. Now that you have a good idea of what family history materials you have, decide on the scope of your project. This differs from the focus because in this case, you're considering the amount of materials you want to digitize. You may not have the time, capacity, or desire to digitize everything you have, and that's okay. What items have the most value to you? Maybe you've pulled together all of your family photos, but right now you want to focus on those created before a certain date. Or you took lots of photos of the scenery on family vacations, but realize you treasure those photos with people in them the most. Even if you do want to digitize every scrap of paper and family video, which is also completely fine, break your project up into chunks so you can more easily tackle it. One other consideration when it comes to scope, remember that you have to have storage space for your newly digitized files. Digital storage can be relatively cheap, but depending on how many items you have, your budget may limit your scope. So now let's talk about the all-important step of digitization. Depending on what kind of materials you have, you will need to use different equipment. For flat materials like papers, photographs, drawings, negatives, and slides, you'll likely use a flatbed scanner. And for slides and negatives, you'll have an attachment that you can use with that. You could also use the scanner for books, journals, and other materials that lie flat easily. For bound items that don't open easily or are fragile, you may want to use a digital camera instead. Use a camera to photograph clothing, quilts, awards, furniture, and other 3D items that are part of your family's collection. Consider using a light box or hanging up a white sheet against which to photograph these objects, and make sure you photograph them in a space with plenty of natural light or bright lighting. You don't want to go through the work of photographing all of your grandmother's hand-sewn quilts, only to find out that the photographs are dark and grainy. You might also choose to use a smart device to photograph and scan materials. Smartphone cameras, for example, are increasing in quality, and there are many apps you can download to scan documents. Adobe Scan is a great free option to scan, email, and save documents. But I would recommend you use a high-quality flatbed scanner and digital camera if you can. A smart device is a great alternative if you don't have access to this type of equipment. When it comes to VHS tapes, floppy disks, 8mm films, and other obsolete technology, you can often find devices that will convert them to modern technology or to digital files. Dave will mention some of these devices in his part of the presentation. And if you're not an ELA library patron, I encourage you to ask your local library whether they have similar equipment that you can use. Before you scan or photograph anything, decide on how you will name your files. A descriptive file name will help you decipher what the document is, especially if you've lost any other information about it. So for example, if you're scanning a stack of photos from your family's annual barbecue, you might include the family name, the event name, the date, and the number of the photo in the stack. So whether it's the first photo, the second photo, essentially giving it a unique identity. If you're scanning your grandparents' love letters, you might include their names as well as a description, a date, and again, the number of that letter in the pile. By including multiple pieces of information in each file name, you're taking a big step towards explaining just what all of those files represent. Make sure you're creating high-resolution copies in the best file formats. When it comes to scanning, 300 or 600 DPI, sometimes also called PPI, will generally give you the results you want. But if you want very high quality images, you can choose to scan at 1200 DPI or above. Just be warned that file size increases with resolution, so that means more storage space. You always want to scan in color, even when you're dealing with black and white photographs. And that's because a color scan will pick up more shading and details than a black and white scan will. You'll have a richer image. There are lots of formats you can save your files in, but there are several that archivists recommend as the best and the longest lasting. Software is always changing, so if possible, you want to avoid formats specific to a certain software. So think of all those files saved in WordPerfect that you might not be able to use anymore. PDF is the best format for documents. JPEG and TIFF are great for images. WAV works best for audio files, and MP4 is great for videos. If you use Macs, MOV also works for videos. When scanning or photographing, make sure to capture all of the information the item has to give. For example, if a photo has a name and date listed on the back, identifying the person in the photo, scan the back of the photograph in addition to the front. Or if a handmade dress has a name stitched into the collar or some other special detail, take a photograph of that detail. These pieces of information help tell your family's story, and it's easier to capture them at this point in the process rather than going through those photos or those boxes of dresses again to try to find that detail later. So before we move on to the next step, let's talk about preserving your physical family archives. Many people think that once they've digitized family papers, it's okay to toss the physical copies away. But remember, hardware and software can fail, and files can easily become corrupted or obsolete. Think of your digitized files as a copy you can use and share without damaging the original item, rather than your only copy. As long as you have the space, keep your original physical copies because you can never get these back once you've thrown them away. If you're digitizing your family papers because you don't have the space or capacity to keep them, consider asking family members if they would be willing to keep some or all of your papers, or whittle down your collection to your most treasured materials. You might keep one album of your favorite family photographs, for example, rather than every vacation shot and school photo. That way you're still keeping some of those physical family history materials while being able to store a lot more in a digital space. As you're sorting your collection for digitization, make a note of any items that are fragile or seem in some need of TLC. You might find discoloration, water damage, even mildew and mold. Each of these issues can be dealt with, although in the case of the most badly damaged items, your best case scenario may be creating high quality digital files and letting go of those originals. Perform some basic preservation as you scan items. Remove staples, rubber bands, tape, and non-stainless steel paper clips where possible. All of these fasteners will eventually rust, disintegrate, or discolor your documents. If you need to group items together, put them in a file folder or use a stainless steel paper clip. If you have the budget, store papers in acid-free folders and boxes. Archival grade materials are always the best if you can afford them. And store photos in Mylar photo sleeves. So Mylar photo sleeves at this point, that's pretty much any kind of photo sleeve you can buy at the store. Photo and document sleeves also work well for postcards, ticket stubs, and other ephemera. Clothing and small objects can be wrapped in acid-free tissue paper and stored in boxes. Make sure as you're organizing your collection that you're labeling any folders, binders, and boxes so you can easily determine what's inside. And finally, store your physical collection in a cool, dry space. Avoid basements, attics, and garages, as the temperature and moisture levels can vary widely. Try to find space in a linen closet, as these small enclosed spaces often work well for protecting your collection. So back to our digitized files. You've already taken the step of creating descriptive file names, which is your last defense against losing information about the file. But in the best case scenario, you will be able to add information about each item to the file itself or a separate document. This information, also called metadata, can be as brief or as detailed as you would like. I would recommend, at minimum, including any names of people, places, or events depicted in the item, the date the item was created, and a brief description of that item. Depending on your scanning software or the software you use to store your files, you may be able to add information to the file itself. But if that's not possible, create a spreadsheet to add these details. You might prefer using a spreadsheet for speed and ease of use, and because you can add information about groups of files in one place. So for example, with the family barbecue or the grandparents' love letters, you can add Similar information, if you have a 5-page letter or a collection of photos that depicts the same event happening at the barbecue, you can kind of copy some of that information a little more quickly in a spreadsheet. Just like with physical files, organize your digital files into groups using folders. These could be chronological, based on family groups or certain events. If possible, you want to mirror the organization of your digital files with your physical files. So that way you can, no matter where you're looking, you can find something quickly. Here's one more reminder to think twice before throwing away your original copies of family papers and mementos. As tempting as it can be to declutter your life in favor of digital storage, consider what you could lose if your hard drive of photos is damaged in a flood, or the flash drive with the only copy of your parents' love letters is corrupted. Paper, if you think about it, is actually a much more reliable format than any digital file. There are documents made with wood pulp, linen, and papyrus that have lasted for decades, centuries, even millennia at this point, much longer than we can prove that a PDF can last. When it comes to storing your digital archives, keep at least 2 copies of your files in 2 separate locations for long-term storage. Your best options are using hard drives and the cloud. So you might keep a hard drive at home in the linen closet with your paper files and store duplicate copies of those files on a cloud service like Dropbox or Google Drive. That way, if one storage method fails for any reason, you have a backup copy of all those digital files. You can use flash drives, CDs, and DVDs to store these files as well, but these technologies are more likely to fail and to fail sooner than a hard drive or the cloud. So I would recommend only using flash drives and disks to transport or share family history files, rather than using them for permanent storage. For example, you might copy all of your old family videos onto DVDs for your family members to enjoy, but you also want to make sure that you have copies of the video files on your hard drive. Last but not least, it's best practice to check your files on a regular basis to make sure they are still working and to convert them to newer file formats as old formats become obsolete. There's no need to check every single file each time you do this, but you might spot check a few files of each format you have to make sure you can still open, view, and play them. Or you might check them after you install new software on your computer or upgrade your operating system. Before we move on to the last step, I want to take a minute to talk about born digital files. Born digital refers to files that were created in a digital format, like a Word document, a digital photo, an email, or a social media post. These can be printed out to create a physical document, but they started out as digital files, just like your aunt's World War II era journal started out on paper. Born digital files need care just like your physical files. And because digital files are less visible than a stack of photo albums, it can be easy to forget just how much you've accumulated. You can take the same steps we've already discussed to go through your digital files. Assemble your files, making sure to remember files stored on different devices like your computer, your smartphone, a flash drive, a CD, those files you put in the cloud. Don't forget your email and social media. Think of these like the letters, telegrams, and journals of today. Sort your files and decide what you want to keep. Make sure they have descriptive file names, and you can add additional metadata to each file on a separate spreadsheet if you'd like. This may come in handy, for example, when the thousands of digital photos you have, with the thousands of digital photos you've taken on trips. Check the formats of your files and convert them to better formats if needed. Back up your files in at least 2 different locations and then share them just like you would your digitized files. So you may have noticed that I didn't mention the step to scan or photograph. Of course, this is because we're talking about files that are already digital. But there's also the question of whether to print your most important digital files. This is a way of creating another backup copy, and you may choose to do this with files you'd like to integrate into your physical family archives. So maybe you finally decide to print some of those digital photos out and add them to your family albums with all the print photographs. Or you want the love letters you wrote over email to sit next to the love letters your grandparents wrote to each other in longhand. This isn't a necessary step by any means, but one to consider as you get all of your family history files in order. Now on to the last step, one that can be a lot of fun for you and your family. Once you've digitized your collection, you can share them with family and friends. Post vintage photos online, copy favorite family videos to DVDs and send them to relatives. Frame a favorite photo of the grandkids for the grandparents, or create a memory book of recipe cards and photos of family members making those recipes. Upload photos and documents to a genealogy website to grow your family tree. There are really endless options here, and all of them have been made possible by all that hard work you've put into digitizing your collection. So before we move on to the second part of the presentation, let's review the 6 steps one more time. Assemble your family papers, select what you want to digitize and preserve the materials, describe and organize your digital files, store and care for your digitized papers, and share your family history with others. So before we move on to talking about the equipment you can use at ELA and elsewhere, does anyone have any questions about the digitization or preservation process? And again, you can use the chat and Q&A to ask those questions. All right, it looks like N has asked, will this presentation be uploaded to the YouTube channel? Yes, it will. We're going to edit it and upload it to YouTube and send the link out to all attendees within the next few days to the next week. So you will get a full recording of this presentation. And Sally asks, is there a handout? Yes, Sally, so in the reminder for the program tonight, I attached the handout, and then I will also send an email out after the event, again, with the handout attached. Okay. Lubna asks, how should you store old photos to preserve them? That is a great question, Lubna. So when you have photographs, I would recommend storing them in Mylar sleeves. You can buy, these are just the photo sleeves you can buy, online. You can buy them at Walmart. You can buy them, I think, even in craft stores sometimes. So you can also buy them for different size and shape photographs. So anything from, a small 2x3 to an 8.5 by 11. And I would recommend storing these photos in the Mylar sleeves and in binders. You can organize them, so you can still look through them if you want to, or if you're really kind of organizing them to store, whatever method makes the most sense to you. If you do have, I know a lot of people, including my own family, have a lot of those albums where you kind of like stick the photos to the page, and then there's kind of the plastic sheet that goes over them. If possible, remove the photos from those albums, because that glue will certainly damage the photos eventually. It's better to have them not sticking to anything. I know in some cases that may be hard to do at this point without damaging the photos, or if there's notes or other kind of material in there, it might be, you might not want to kind of destroy a scrapbook. But if there are just photos stuck in those kind of sticky albums, I would recommend taking those out if possible. All right. Valerie asks, any suggestions on putting together digitized photos from multiple sources? So for example, Google Photos, iPhotos, DVDs from the early 2000s, etc. And some are on I would suggest if you can download those photos and kind of have them all together in a set of folders and maybe organize those folders by topic or date. That's a great way to store them. I'd keep copies on a hard drive if you have an external hard drive. And then you can still have them you might upload all of those photos back into Google Photos so you have them in the cloud as well. So that way, if the hard drive gets destroyed in a flood, or I don't think Google Photos is going to fold anytime soon, but if a cloud service you use folds, then you still have a copy somewhere else. So yeah, I would bring them all together and kind of make sure you have them organized, and then save them in a couple different places. All right, Lubna asks, should you put them in the attic? Is it too damp? What temperature is bad for the photos? Another great question. So I would avoid, if you can, avoid the attic, the basement, and the garage. So those three places are typically the least temperature and humidity controlled spaces in the house. So photos and documents, especially like dry, cool conditions. So if you can keep them in a place that's away from any kind of fluctuations in humidity and temperature, that's ideal. So like I said earlier, a linen closet or some other kind of room in the interior of the house is really the best if you have that space. If not, you just gotta do your best, make your best choice as to what space will be the most ideal. So typically in archives, they keep the temperature at 60 degrees and humidity at 40%. So if you think of that 60-40, the closest you can get to that, the better. So that way paper, but in both cases, if you can keep them in the kind of 60-degree, 40% humidity range, somewhere right around there, that is going to be your best bet as far as preserving those photos and other documents for future generations. So does anyone else have questions at this point? Okay. Lubna asks, how secure are the photos in the cloud? Can other people copy them? So it depends on your privacy settings. Certainly, there are ways to make sure that your photos are only viewable by yourself, or any family members that you give access to the folders that they're stored in. You can make folders and individual files public if you wanted to, like if you wanted to share some of your favorite family photos, on Facebook and link back to an album of all of them in the cloud. But for the most part, when you create a file, it's pretty much usually just private to you, at least in my experience, until you choose to share them with others. So I think they would be fairly secure that way. And a follow-up question, does it cost money to put them in the cloud? Again, it depends on how many that you have. For example, Google Drive, I can't remember off the top of my head, I think they give you 15 gigabytes of storage for free. So that's quite a lot of photos right there. So in a lot of cases, up to a certain point, you'll get free storage. Dropbox is another one that gives you a certain number of gigabytes for free. I can't remember. And then if you do need additional space, you can purchase that for a fee. So it really depends on how much you have and how much you want to store in the cloud. So again, the most common cloud services, I would just look into those and see, compare pricing plans. That may be how you decide, or you might decide to store them in Google Photos because you already have a Gmail address, something like that. But at least for the first so many gigabytes, that storage is typically free, at least with like the big name kind of cloud services. All right. Any last questions before we move on to Dave's part of the presentation? These have all been really fantastic questions. All right, so now that we've gone over that digitization and preservation information, my colleague Dave is going to tell you about the equipment you can project. So I'm going to stop my share and let him take over.
Good evening, I am Dave. I'm the technology librarian, if you will, at the Gila Area Library. And part of what I do is work with our digital media labs. So I'm going to tell you some of the equipment that we have in our media labs. And then after that, I'll tell you that we also have items at the Library of Things that you can check out and bring home if you wish to digitize your family photos or letters or mementos or whatnot. So in the meantime, let me start sharing my screen. All right, so we should be able to see my PowerPoint presentation, which I'm going to start now. So here's a picture of one of our digital media labs. By the way, before we continue, the digital media labs are on the second floor, and they're in the adult reference department. And then I'll tell you the guidelines when we get to the end. But first of all, I want to tell you about the fun part, which is the equipment that we have. So let's begin. So one of the options that we have, and probably the most popular item, the most popular equipment that we have in the Media Lab, is the VHS DVD player. And with this player, you can convert old VHSs to DVDs. And this could be good for genealogy or family purposes. For example, I've had people come in with old VHS tapes, like a wedding, for example, or a tape with a grandparent who was no longer around. So it gives them an option to preserve it, because I don't think VHS tapes last forever, if you will. So we have a VHS to DVD converter in which you can do that. In addition, it's also a good place to view, like to watch a VHS tape. I mean, a lot of us now don't even have a VHS player, right? So I've got I still have a number of old VHS tapes. And if I'm curious as to what I have on one, I can always bring it to the library just to view. This also has a VHS-C adapter. So there's mini VHS tapes. So we have one of those too. So if you have a mini VHS tape, we can also convert that to a DVD. One thing that you need to know is that it does it all in real time. So if you have a 2-hour VHS tape, it's going to be 2 hours plus whatever finishing time we have at the end, which is usually 15 to 20 minutes. So I always suggest that you multitask if you decide to do a VHS to DVD conversion. Another item I'd like to bring up is our scanner. We actually have 2 scanners. Both of these will scan slides and negatives. And the one on top will also scan photos and papers. So the Epson scanner is the first one, as you can see here on the upper right. Right now that's available in Media Lab B, but it's also available in all of our study rooms. So you don't even need to use the Media Lab to use this piece of equipment to scan. It is a little bit slower than I would like sometimes, but it does scan very good photos. So you can scan old negatives and slides, and it will convert it into a positive photographic image in digital form. Another thing we have, and this is a relatively new piece of equipment, is this Kodak Scanza. And that's the one you see in the lower right, which is available in Media Lab A, which does not have the Epson scanner. So you could use this in Media Lab A for slides or negatives. You're not able to do photos, however. You do need to have an SD card because it will scan it right onto the SD card. And we have one at the reference desk. If you don't have one, we have one that you could borrow. And then you can move it over to like a USB flash drive. One thing I like about this is that it scans a lot faster than the Epson scanner. All right, so let's move on to the next piece of equipment, which is for recording audio and video. So first of all, here on the top, we have a tiny little cassette player. It sort of looks like a Walkman, if anybody remembers those. And you might have an old cassette of a family member, for example. Like you might have a great grandparent from like the 70s on a cassette tape. And now you could bring the tape into the library and you can convert it into a digital format, which will then be easier to share with others. And I think Rebecca commented about how sharing is part of the fun, if you will, of preserving genealogy items. Whoops, I went back for some reason. We also have a microphone and camcorder. So you might even decide to record your own voiceover or video. So back to the cassette player, I sort of went out of order. That's in the upper left. It has a USB cable, and this is very easy to use. You just simply put in your cassette tape, hook it up to the computer. In the Media Lab, we have there's a software program, which for some reason the name escapes me. Sorry about that. However, it is in the directions, which we have in the Media Lab. And then you could record it into a digital format. Then you could burn it to a CD rather, or save it to a flash drive. A new thing that we're kind of excited about, we have an LP player where you can take old LPs and save them into an MP3. So I don't know if that's something that would apply to genealogy necessarily, but I suppose it could, right? This can do 33 1/3, 45 and 78. So maybe you want to preserve your grandparents' old 78 records, for example. Save it in a digital format. All right, so the rooms also have a number of editing software. There's the iLife suite, which comes with Apple computers. Both of the computers in the Media Labs are Apple's. So we have iMovie, in which you can edit old family video. For example, you could add titles, you could add transitions, you could add sound effects. It's a fairly easy and quality program, in my opinion. There's GarageBand, which is, I mean, you could record your own music, but you might want to use it for genealogy purposes to record voiceover. We also have Apple Photos, which is a pretty easy photo storage system, and you can do simple edits on there as well. We also have the Adobe Suite programs, and these are a lot more complicated. They're more professional, if you will. So you could use Photoshop and Illustrator for your photos. And I think InDesign is like a video program. I might be mistaken. I don't know all of the Adobe programs. We don't support those, but they are available for anyone who knows how to use them. And then we have Roxio Toast, which is a program in which you can burn a CD or a DVD, because Apple computers no longer have a CD DVD burning program. So we use Roxio Toast. So that's some of the main equipment that we have in the Media Lab, which I believe would be useful for someone wanting to preserve their to preserve for genealogy reasons, if you will. And before we go on to the next part, these are some of the main guidelines. So the Media Lab is available for registered card holders ages 12 and up. If anybody's younger than 12, they'll have to come in with an adult, like a parent or older sibling. The Media Labs are available for 3 hours at a time, so you can get at least 3 hours a day, and they can fit up to 3 people. And then, like the policy is with our study rooms, if that room is not needed by anyone else, you are welcome to stay longer. But we can at least guarantee 3 hours. If you're an ELA card holder, you can reserve the lab up to 7 days in advance, which can be pretty good. So that way you can guarantee having a spot. If you are not an ELA card holder, you are still welcome to use the Media Labs, but we can only do it on a walk-in basis only. So let's go on to the next part. So I wanted to give at least a brief overview of the Media Lab. Oh, and in addition to that, on occasion, I will do classes in the Media Lab. For example, the most recent one I did was on iMovie. And in the near future, we'll be doing one on preserving your records and tapes. All right, so now let's go on to the Library of Things. The Library of Things is located on our first floor of the library. If I didn't clarify earlier, the Media Labs are on the second floor, and we have 2. The Library of Things is exactly what it sounds like. They're things. So they're not books, if you will, or what you might think is a traditional library item, but there's all kinds of things, even like baking pans or fishing poles. I don't think you could use those for genealogy purposes, but we do have some items that you can. So I'd like to cover some of the highlights in the Library of Things. So one item which is pretty cool is a digital converter. This will do 8mm and Super 8 tape. And one thing that's great about that is we don't have that ability in the Media Lab. But you can check this out at the library, through the Library of Things. This, by the way, is called the Wolverine. You might be able to read it here. It'll convert your 8mm and Super 8 into a digital movie file, which you can then save on your computer. You could also burn it to a DVD after you've done that, and you can share it with other people. Or you can save it and put it up on YouTube if you have a YouTube account. All right, another thing we have is a digital SLR camera. So you might want to take photos with a high quality camera when you're at, say, like a once every 10 year like family reunion or whatnot. So you can, I think this is one of those born digital formats that Rebecca was talking about. This is considered to be a good camera for beginners to take high quality photos. As I said before, it's great for photographing relatives and works well in low light situations. Another item that we have is the mobile scanner. So you could use this, right, to scan your own photos at home. And then this way you can preserve it for, you can reserve it. I should probably check on how long. Yeah, it's a 3-week checkout. Thankfully, I put that in my notes. So you can check this out at the library and then have it for 3 weeks, and you can do you can scan a lot of photos in that way. Right, it's good for large, you can do kind of large documents and memorabilia. It does not need a computer to operate. but you will need 4 AA batteries and your own SD card. You can see there's a little SD card here, not included. And you could save it on a flash drive. And I imagine you can also hook that up to the computer and save it directly that way. So let's move on to the next item. We have an LCD projector. This is by Epson. You'd see it right here, Epson. And it'll display movies, photos, or presentations. It has both a zoom and focus wheel behind the lens. It has ports, so you can put like portable data on there, like a USB port. So if it's on if your presentation is on a USB drive, you can put it on there. Right, you might want to like do a presentation of family photographs or of a family vacation. It will also connect via VGA, HDMI, and other cables, so you can also hook it up to your computer. The next item we have external USB disk drives. One is the portable BD writer, so you can use it to view a DVD, a Blu-ray, or hear a CD, because you know what? A lot of computers don't even come with a disk drive anymore. But you can check this out at the library if you would like to see what you have on a disk. And then even more like antique, if you will. Does anyone remember floppy disks? We have a portable floppy disk drive. You may have preserved some family photos or like documents on a floppy disk drive. So it might be worth checking out one of these and seeing what you've got saved. All right, so finally, some of the other items that you might find interesting. We have a GoPro. You could, that would be good for recording a family outing. We also have a Wi-Fi hotspot. I don't know if you'd use it for genealogy, but it's something cool to have. If you, you can bring it on a trip and have Wi-Fi wherever you are. We also have a metal detector and laptop bundle. So you get a laptop and like the accoutrements, if you will, the things that come with the laptop. Before I conclude, there are, of course, guidelines to the Library of Things. These are for ELA card holders only. Non-card holders are more than welcome to use our media labs on a walk-in basis, but they are not able to check out Library of Things items. So if you are from another library, see if your library also has a Library of Things. The items are available for a 3-week checkout. You can check out up to 3 Library of Things items at a time. And renewables, you are not able to renew because, you know, we have more of a limited option, a limited supply of Library of Things items, as opposed to books, and a lot of these items are very popular, so we don't have renewals. So that's it. We looked at the media lab and the Library of Things, and equipment that we have that can be helpful for those of you who want to preserve your family records. And on that note, I'm going to unshare my screen. And if anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask.
While we're waiting for questions, I just want to note that I love that we have a metal detector. I don't know if anyone's ever used a metal detector, but I think it would be a lot of fun if a family property is still in family hands, using the metal detector, or if you can get permission, if the property is not in family hands anymore, to kind of investigate and see what you can find. If there's anything that, any relics of your past relatives on the land. I think that's a really neat item that we have in the collection.
That could be useful for that. I always think pirate coins for some reason.
Well, that too.
So if your great grandparent were pirates, then you might find their old coins.
All right, it looks like Shauna has a question. Dave, this is probably a good one for you.
Do any of the yes, photo scanners have a feeder? So like by a feeder, do you mean like you put the items in and it just sort of automatically goes through it? I think unfortunately we don't have that ability on any of our photo scanners. You do have to do it manually. Yes, you can feed them one. Well, I should have clarified this earlier. You are able to scan more than one slide or negative at a time. For example, the Epson scanner has a slide insert that you put onto the glass on the scanner, and then you can place up to 4 slides in there. So you can scan up to 4 slides at a time. And you can also do like 2 strips of photo negatives. The Scanza, the portable scanner, it's kind of hard to explain, but you are able to sort of manually advance. Like I think you can put multiple slides into there's different inserts depending on the size of the slide. And you could put up to like, I'm gonna say about 4 slides on one insert, and there's even a way where you don't have to take the insert out. You could use one slide to kind of push through to the other slides. I don't know if that makes a lot of sense. I should do a class on that. One thing with that Scanza though is it scans considerably faster. So I like that, but you can put multiple slides and negatives into the insert, but then you kind of have to manually advance, if you will. So I hope that answered your question. Thank you. Thank you.
So while we're waiting for other questions, which please keep posting those in the chat and the Q&A if you have questions. I also want to mention the Library of Things has an audio recorder kit. If you want to speak to relatives, maybe interview any grandparents or aunts and uncles, or even siblings, those older generations especially, while they're still around. The audio recorder kit is a great thing that you can check out. It comes in a little carrying case, so you can take it with you to a family reunion or to a family member's household and record their memories there. And like Dave mentioned, there's a really nice microphone in the digital media labs if you wanted to bring them into the digital media labs for a conversation.
That's a good question. Who do you see about the digital lab at the library? You have a number of options. You would need your library card, but you can reserve it online. You know what? I'll put in the link. So that's one of the options. You can actually reserve a room online up to a week in advance if you have an ELA card. Otherwise, you can also call the reference desk on the 2nd floor. And for some reason, I'm having a hard time finding this link, so thanks for bearing with me. Or if you're in the library, you can also spin on by to the reference desk on the 2nd floor, and let us know you'd like to use the Media Lab or to reserve it for a future time.
Dave, I've got the link, so I'll share that in the chat.
Oh, that would be great.
Everyone, I'm going to share the links
Having a
to,
hard time finding it.
that's okay, our Library of Things collection, our digital media labs, both more information, and if you want to book an appointment online. And then just again, our genealogy newsletter and upcoming events, if you're interested in those.
Another question, can someone show you how to use the equipment? We can definitely offer some sort of support. For a while, we did like our one-on-one appointments. And well, of course, COVID sort of scrapped that. We haven't resumed them as of yet. In addition, we're also undergoing some construction at the library, which is causing a few challenges with that. However, I don't want to discourage anybody from coming in, so I don't mean to do that. I'm just saying we haven't quite started the appointments yet, but we do have directions in the room. And in addition to that, I think most of us would be, I know I would be like happy to help anybody get started on some of the equipment. And in addition, I'm going to be offering some Media Lab related classes.
I want to share too a great resource that we have for the VHS to DVD converter in the lab that personally I use every time I need to either help someone or convert a VHS tape for my own purposes. There's a really great video on our YouTube channel that I don't know if Dave, if that was you that recorded that or someone else, but it takes you step by step through the process at a really nice pace. So you can even pause and play. But that really is a wonderful, wonderful video to have when you're converting your VHS tapes. It works every time for me.
It's a good video. I think it was our old supervisor, Ann, who did the video. Let me see. Any other questions?
It looks like in chat, Natalie asks, I have a lot of slides, but need a round carousel to put on the projector. Do you have one to check out?
A round carousel, good question. Off the top of my head, I don't believe that we do, but I'm not entirely sure. I don't think we do. It seems to me like it could be like a library things item. I know that we don't in our Media Lab. Let me see if if there's something in the catalog.
Well,
Yeah,
Dave,
I don't think that we do.
but I think what you could do probably is use that piece of equipment in our digital media labs or any of our scanners to digitize the slides. And then instead of having to use a slide projector, you could just have those digital images and either use a regular projector or just show them on a computer screen or a TV screen.
Yes, and you could even do things like add music or like titles or whatnot, and then you could definitely use the LCD projector that we have, but I'm pretty sure we don't have a carousel. But that might be something worth getting down the line.
I'll say we're always open to suggestions for
Absolutely.
new equipment. We've had some really great patron suggestions, even just over the last few months, where we've been able to purchase equipment. I think Dave, what were those drawing pads? I think that was a patron suggestion.
It sure was. Yes, we have a drawing pad, which gives you the ability to draw something in Photoshop. So you draw, it's kind of odd how it works, is you draw on the pad and the image appears on the computer.
which is excellent if you want to add mustaches or funny hats
Oh,
on
yeah,
photos.
absolutely.
So does anyone have any more questions for us tonight? I'm gonna move through just to our upcoming events one more time in case anyone didn't see those at the beginning. And just as a reminder, these are our winter genealogy events. They're all on Zoom. They, just like this program, they will all be recorded and shared on our YouTube channel, some for longer than others. Just depends on the speaker's preferences. And these will all be available to register for on December 1st on our website.